Congratulations, you've made it to week 6. So this will be our final lesson. This one is going to be a little bit different. What's going to happen is you're going to need to write down your work on a sheet of notebook paper. And you're going to submit the work in a separate assignment so that we can see the work you've done and double check on your performance with this. Now, the good news is, since we are requiring you to turn in the work with this as a separate assignment, we're only going to be doing 10 problems. The form will contain 20 problems that you're going to key in answers to, but that's because each one of these problems has 2 parts to the answer. And so this is to make the form work a little more smooth, I guess would be a way to say it. What you're going to be doing is you're going to be using a process called completing the square. Now, what this slide does, and this slide is also posted within the form, is it is a very nice organized note that shows you step by step each part of the process, so that hopefully it will make it very easy for you to understand. Now, the form's primary purpose, again, should be that you are checking to make sure that you are correctly working these. If you're not able to correctly work one, then you should let us know. Now, I will probably go ahead and post in both classes. There's this lovely fun video by this guy named Flula. I like Flula. He's so funny. And he's going to go over completing the square that happens in Algebra 2. And so it's a nice little preview of next year, and this is part of why we decided to instruct on this particular topic, so that you can see what's coming with completing the square, because in Algebra 2, this will come back again. It's going to be a little bit different, but understanding it somewhat now should hopefully help you to be able to do better with it when you do it next year. So I will be posting that lovely Flula video. I did ask him to make us one for this. If he actually makes one, I'll post it, but I don't know that he's going to listen to little old me much. All right, so at the top, you're going to see a problem very similar to the problems we're going to look at. We're going to do a couple of examples together. So you're going to be given this equation here, and you're going to be asked, well, write this equation in standard form for the circle, and then also identify the center and the radius. Well, just looking at this gobbledygook, it's going to be a bit of a problem. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through this step-by-step process. I'm really not explaining why I'm doing this. It's just an organizational technique, and we'll talk a little bit about why completing the square is helping us. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to move the x terms together in descending order, which means you put the x squared term first, the plain x next, then you're going to put the y squared term next, and the plain y next. And we want to leave that constant term at the very end. Now, once you've done that, and you can kind of combine steps 1 and 2 once you get really good at this. What's going to happen is we're going to cancel out this constant from the left-hand side and get it to move over to the right-hand side. So in my classes, we've been talking a little bit about how the fact that when we want to cancel this negative 15, we add 15 to both sides. So what really happens is we take this and we move it to the other side, and it changes signs. So that negative 15 becomes a positive 15 on the other side. If you understand that process and why that works, you're welcome to use that shortcut. And again, you can combine steps 1 and 2. The next step is you're going to set up the parentheses, kind of like we did in the previous lesson, to be able to write our circle equation in standard form. Now, where we get the numbers that go in here, and this is all based on FOIL. If I'm going to FOIL this out, so let me see, we can actually write that over here to the side. Whoops, I went ahead a slide. If we were to FOIL this guy out right here, let's look at what happens. Really? I love computers when they work. All right, so we're going to use that same color I've been using all day, because I'm doing all 3 weeks videos in one day. If we take this value right here and we FOIL it out, I want you to kind of see what happens, because this is why we're halving it. So we're going to do first times first. And in my class, we've practiced this a little bit. If you haven't, you should have seen it last year. So FOIL, first, outer, inner, last. It's an acronym, right? And it just tells us how to distribute these values. So first times first is taking this x and multiplying it by the x. Outer times outer is going to take this x and multiply it by the 1. So what this is it's like distributive property extreme. The x gets multiplied by everything in the second parenthesis, and now the 1's going to get multiplied by everything in the second parenthesis, because we do inner times inner. So 1 times x is going to be 1x, and last times last. 1 times 1 is going to be 1. So now when we look at this, what that lovely little squared expression represents is this. So this is going to help me explain both ideas. All right, so how we got that number that goes in the parenthesis is we took this number here and we divided it by 2. And the reason we did that is because I know when I FOIL this, I'm going to end up with 2 of them. So I would end up with 2 of whatever I put in that parenthesis. So I want this to be half of what I want. Okay, so we do the same thing here. So half of the -6 would be -3. So we put that in here. Notice I'm not changing the signs this time. That's because I'm going from equation to equation. The only time we change signs is when we go from equation to coordinate or coordinate to equation. All right, so now that's a very big idea. So let me say it one more time. Anytime we go from equation to coordinate, down here we can see the example, equation to coordinate, or coordinate to equation, that's when the signs change. But when we're going equation to equation to equation to equation, we do not change any signs. All right, so that's how I'm getting the -3 is I'm halving this, because I know when I FOIL it, right here I would end up with -3y, -3y, which would get me that -6y back. All right, so that's how we got this step. We divide the second term by 2 and put the number only in this parenthesis, and that's because of this FOIL idea. All right, now that brings us to step 5. Why on earth are we adding these over here? Well, notice this piece right here, the only thing I had was the x squared plus the 2x. That's only this part. I added, when I put this one in this parenthesis, I introduced this 1, which is 1 squared. So that's kind of a bad example. When we put this -3 in this parenthesis, we are introducing a -3 squared, which is this 9. So to make the equation balanced still, since we put these here, we have to add the square. So this is why it's called completing the square. We add the square to both ones of the numbers, both of the numbers, let me get my English correct, both of the numbers in the parentheses on this right-hand side. Once we've done that, we're simply going to simplify and we get 25. I do believe all 10 questions we're giving you on this should work out very nice and pretty. We normally would have you do quite a bit more practice with this, and we would make some of them a little more challenging. But this concept's rather challenging on its own. All right, so now if this is +1, when I go from equation to coordinate, it's going to be -1. If this is -3, when I go from equation to coordinate, it's going to be +3. Then remember, this is our radius squared. So to find the actual radius, we just take the square root of that. And ta-da, that's it. So our center would be at -1, +3. Our radius would be 5, and this is the standard form of our equation. All right, we've got a couple more to practice. So we're going to go through this step-by-step process. I am not going to number it this time. I'm just going to do the process. And this first one, I'm not going to combine step 1 and 2. I'm going to do them separately, but the next one we may go ahead and combine them. So the first thing we do is we put them in descending order. So we start with the x squared. So we've got x squared, and I like to do this too. If I'm going to do one of these, I'm easily confused if you haven't noticed. I will write down the entire equation on my notebook paper, and then I'll mark them out as I use them. So I've got x squared plus 24x. And if you are young and still have good brain function, by all means, you don't have to do this. But if you get confused easily because you play too much video games, I totally get you. So make sure that you're writing down the whole equation and then sorting them. All right, so we get y squared plus 14y. So we use the y squared, we use the 14y, and then we still have positive 168. Our constant always goes at the end. Oh, excuse me. Equals 0. Okay, for the second step, we want to get the constants or the plain numbers on the right side. So we're going to have x squared plus 24x plus y squared plus 14y are all still going to stay here. And we're going to look at this more concretely. To get rid of this, I would do minus 168 minus 168. These are going to cancel out. And over here, I'm going to end up with negative 168. All right, now we're ready to set up our parentheses. Now this one I'm actually going to kind of blend because I did it step by step in the note sheet so you could see each individual step. But I'm not going to set these up and then rewrite the setup. That's just silly. So we're going to set them up and we're going to get ready to complete the next couple of steps. Now we're going to divide the second variable term for each variable by 2 and put the number only in the corresponding parenthesis. So 24 divided by 2 would be 12. Again, remember, your sign does not change when you go equation to equation. 14 divided by 2 is going to be 7. Again, sign does not change when you go equation to equation. Now, that's step 4. In this same line, I can do step 5. We want to add the square of the number that we put in the parentheses to the right side to accommodate that extra term we added in when we do the FOIL. So we would add 12 squared, which I know is 144, and we would add 7 squared, which I know is 49. If you need your calculator to do that, there's no shame in that. So this should be 49. Oh, wow. I'm not happy with that at all. Plus 49. Okay, so now we're going to add all that together. Now, this is negative and this is positive. So I'm just going to go ahead and add those. And when I do that, I'm going to end up with 4 here because we're actually subtracting them. And I'm going to end up with 2 here, right? So I get negative 24 plus 49. And I'm just doing this on paper because I'm too lazy to get my calculator. And lo and behold, I get 25. All right, so now my final result is I'm going to have x plus 12 squared in a parenthesis plus y plus 7 squared in a parenthesis, y plus 7 in a parenthesis squared, my goodness, equals 25. Now, that's the simplify step. That's the last step. So really, it's not too painful. It does hurt a little bit. And then now we can say what our center is, and that's what your form is going to ask you. One question will ask you the center for your problem, and one question will ask you the radius. So your center will be opposite when we go from equation to coordinate, negative 12, negative 7. And then to get your radius, all you do is take the square root of the 25, which would be 5. So if this was one of our problems in the form, this would be the answer to like question 1, and this would be the answer to question 2. And then this is what you have to have on paper. So all of this, let me see if I can get my pen. This is work required on paper. And you can take a picture of this work with your phone and just attach it to that thing in the Google Classroom. Okay, so hopefully this one made sense. Not much different than the other one we just did. Okay, we've got one more problem, and then I'm done with the instruction, and you're going to work on these on your own. Now, this problem is going to have a couple of issues, so it's going to give us a couple of things to talk about. We're still following the same process. So our first job is to sort. And if you need to, again, write it on notebook paper so that you can organize it. So I'm going to put x squared first. Then I've got negative 24x. Okay, and then I've got just y squared. And I don't have another y term. That's interesting. And then now I need to have enough thought to see this. They want me to get all the constants on the right side. Well, guess what? All the constants are already on the right side. So I don't have to move it. So this is the big thing I want you to understand. Sometimes this is going to happen. And I don't know why I said I was going to combine 1 and 2 here because I forgot this one had the little trick. So if all your constants are already on the right hand side, you get out of doing number 2. So sometimes number 2 won't be required. This one is already done. Okay, so now we're going to set up our parentheses. And when we set up our parentheses this time, we've got an interesting problem. The y doesn't have a second term. So no second term. No parenthesis. So this is just going to be plus y squared. And we'll talk about how we deal with that in the center in just a second. Okay, equals, and we still have the negative 140, which is fine. All right, now what we would do next is we would square negative 24, or half negative 24. My God, I'm nuts. So half of negative 24 would be negative 12. Again, I'm going equation to equation, so I do not want to change signs. Now, since I've put this here, so this we did set up parenthesis, and we divided the second term by 2 and put the number only in the parentheses. So in this case, we only had one second term, so we only had to do that once. Now, what we're going to do is add the square of this number that we put in the parentheses to the right-hand side. So the square of 12 is 144. So now what we've got is x minus 12 squared plus y squared equals, so we're on step 5 already, we're simplifying. We're going to add these two together, and we end up with 4. So this one was actually, it looked scary, it was kind of terrifying, but it was a lot easier. We didn't even have to do step 2. Step 1, we moved everything in order. Step 3, we set up our parentheses and realized we don't need a parenthesis if there's no second term. So we only had one term to divide by 2 and place inside the parenthesis. Then we only had one number to square and add to the right. So we squared the 12, added it to the right. Remember, a negative times a negative is a positive. So what you're adding to the right should always be positive. And we simplified and we were done. So now what we've got to deal with is identifying our center and our radius. So our center is actually going to be, again, if we're going from equation to coordinate, it's going to be the opposite. And then we look at y. Well, what number's with y? What represents nothing? Because nothing is with y. So our center coordinate on this one would actually be a 0 for y. So if the variable doesn't have a parenthesis, it doesn't have that second term, then your center will always be 0. And then our radius is going to be the square root of the constant all by itself over there on the right, which is 2. Again, these two are what you're going to be putting in answers. So if this was like the second question in the form, this would be the answer to maybe 3, and this would be the answer to 4. Make sure you read the directions. There should be 2 questions related to the same equation in the form. So even though there's 20 problems, there's really only 10. One of them's asking for the center of that, and the other one's asking for the radius. And this is just to check that you're doing it correctly. Again, the work is required. You have to take a picture of it and post it on the assignment. So you want to do this work on notebook paper. If you have to post 2 or 3 pictures, it's fine. You can do it on any paper at all. It really doesn't matter, but you've got to have your work shown so we can see what you're doing. If you are getting one wrong, that work is really going to help us to diagnose what's messed up and what you need to think about. I hope this helps. I hope you find this lesson pretty simple. It is going to be short. Please remember, this lesson and any other work that you have turned in has to be done by the 22nd. If you don't have it turned in by May 22nd, we cannot accept it anymore. The deadline for all of our grades is May 22nd. Thanks, guys, and congratulations, you finished.